where can technology do the things that we're not as good at doing, and then let humans be human, and humans connect, and humans think and question and work through things together. And in my mind, technology can't ever replace that. I think learning has the power to be fundamentally changed. I think that a lot of our learning is very antiquated. It's regurgitation and memorization and things that we could Google for, or we could utilize ChatGPT to help us with in different ways, and then really use human creativity and thought.
All right, we're here with Emily Harburg. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Hey, I'd love to kick off just for our audience. Maybe take a minute, introduce yourself, and what led you to founding PairUp.
Yeah. So I'm Emily Harburg, and I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of PairUp. And we are really focused on helping to reimagine the way people connect at work. And we're focused around helping people get the right help at the right time. Yeah, my journey to PairUp has been a winding one. I've been in industry and academia and startups. In my past, was at Disney Imagineering, was at Facebook Meta, where I was looking at connection online, did my PhD in computer science and psychology, where I was really looking at how can technology help us feel more connected at work. When COVID happened and the world was starting to turn, and really specifically people were rethinking how work can be done in more distributed ways. The research that we've been doing and a lot of the work that I'd been working on in organizations really felt pressing, and the world needed PairUp. So started to build out the business and build the team and find funding. And now I've gotten to serve a whole variety of customers in the past year and a half.
That's awesome. You and I had a chance to chat a little bit in our last conversation, and there's I think about PairUp, but just think about the work that you're doing and the research required. There is so much tension right now. And I think every time that there's tension from an economic standpoint and people are getting laid off in different sectors and what's happening, and we have to go from being growth minded to being more profitable, it feels like every time that happens, the relationship, the tethers holding the employee and employer together are exposed.
Yes.
And when they're exposed, I think it's accurate to say in a lot of ways, this tension, like they're fraying. Some people would argue like the employee-employee relationship is broken, has been broken.
Yeah.
But how do you respond to that comment? The employee-employee relationship is broken. And what do you attribute to your beliefs?
In my mind, I think the employee relationship is just being re-envisioned right now. I think that we're in this moment where initially the Great Resignation was happening, where companies were really trying to figure out how do they keep staff happy and engaged and working within organizations. And then there have been all the greats that have happened since then of great rehiring, great reshuffling. I think it's hard to even keep track of all the different greats that have happened in the past year and a half. To me, the optimism is that there are new lines that are being drawn about how people can connect with their employers. Certainly questions of like, how much should work do for you in terms of kind of the role that work plays in your life. But I think a lot of people are rethinking how they want to be at work. How we know how much time and energy it is in our lives and in our days. And so I think that there's almost some like healthy resetting that's happening, but also I think employers are starting to really think about how do we think about the whole person at work, which is good and really hard things that kind of come into that at play. We've been looking a lot at that, and also just been doing a lot of thinking about if we were to really reimagine how people work and connect and go about their days, what could that look like? And especially now with the technologies that are coming out that are shaking and changing the game in interesting ways, like how do we be more human at work? And do things that are more uniquely human. So I think those are some fun questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe going down this path a little bit more, but just what are some major trends that you're following or that you tend to have a very positive view of the future, right? So what trends are you viewing or are you excited about?
Yeah, I definitely carried with me a sense of this is where it can really be used for good. And also part of that is stemmed from a deep research looking at also where it really has gone wrong. And actually a lot of my research back in the day was looking at loneliness online and loneliness at work and where do systems actually make these things much worse. I think to me that this whole kind of new world that's opening up right now with OpenAI and just like rethinking kind of generative AI in general and where things are going, it feels like there's some interesting lines and questions, good and bad, as I said, that are being drawn around. The whole self at work and what roles should be given to AI and what roles are uniquely human. And on my most optimistic days, I feel this deep sense of hopefully this is going to lead to a world where jobs are more human. And on my most pessimistic of days, I see where is this taking out human thought and jobs and agency. And so I think those are two worlds that we need people thinking about and building with. And it's partially why even in my research studies were in psychology and computer science. We were looking at, let's build systems, but really understand how does that affect people in the way that they feel and perform and behave as a result of these systems that we're building with technology. So to me, that's like the interesting, we've got to be thinking with both.
Yeah. And that's one of the phenomena we talk about on this show. As machines continue to take on the more transactional and objective components of work, it leaves us humans to tackle the more relational or subjective components. And just as you were mentioning with AI and Chat GPT, like if you were to just think about that, maybe share for our audience, what are those more human things? What are humans left to do in a world that the machines are doing all the tactical and objective things?
In my mind, I think that the humans should be doing the roles that are really hard for technology to tackle are things like emotional intelligence and actually rational thought and like really thinking through. Certainly, there's argument that technology can also be super rational. I was just talking with a whole group around how can we actually train AI to debate itself, which is an interesting lens to go down. But I do think that there is as humans, we have, in my mind, for instance, the power of human interaction and human connection is something that I don't think technology can ever replace. I think it can enhance how we connect with them. That's even at PairUp, one of our big focus areas is like, where can technology do the things that we're not as good at doing, and then let humans be human and humans connect and humans think and question and work through things together. And in my mind, technology can't ever replace that. I know also we were just talking about in schools. In my mind, I think kids should be able to have ChatGPT and interact with these systems and then use their minds and hearts and thought to actually create and write and do things that are uniquely human. I know that's still vague of which piece is uniquely human. Yeah. The root of it, I would say, is around like human connection and also human thought and critical thinking and emotional intelligence that I think certainly you could try and train a system to be, but will never replace, in my mind, human.
Yeah. And then hopefully it's freeing us humans to do the more, I guess you could say, meaningful work. As humans, we yearn to find work that aligns with our values, to be with others who share them. I believe that.
Yeah.
It's interesting in chatting with many folks about that. I've learned that there are some that don't believe that. They believe that's a provocative thought, that there are some folks that believe that meaningful work does not exist. There is no such thing where all just work is working for the big person and we're just doing it to make a buck. Let's not make any more out of that. Do you think workers are yearning for meaningful work? And if so, how would you define what meaningful work is?
Yeah, I deeply believe that people desire meaningful work, that we as humans, like I don't think everyone is per se wired this way, so that I won't paint too broad of a brush, but I do think we are meant for meaning and we desire and yearn for work that is like in tune with where we feel like we can most best serve and utilize our strengths. And in a beautiful way, I think humans are wired very differently. Like each of us has different things that give us meaning and purpose. And the more that we can figure out how to tap into those things, the better off the world is, the less competitive it is in many ways, because we're all in tune. I remember when I was graduating from undergrad, it felt like there were only 2 tracks of work that you could go into. It was like consulting or investment banking at the time. Yeah. And I remember as a student being like, neither of those, like those aren't actually in tune with what I think my calling is. Like, and if I were to just fall into the trap of going into either of those, I would actually not be like as a helpful citizen as I want to be, or as a contributing member of society, do the things that I feel passionate about, that I love. So I think to me, the exciting thing is, could we help people better tap into what those things are that they really care about, and the things that they have a unique voice to give. And I think that's where, to me, AI could come in and do a lot of the tasks that humans aren't even necessarily that good at doing, or maybe we're okay at doing, but we should actually have a technology just do and process and do at scale. Sure. And then let us tap into those things that are ours. And the other thing I'll say is that we were talking yesterday about Everything Everywhere All at Once, the like movie of the year, which led to all kinds of discussions around meaning and different lives and the metaverse coming in and where all those things. And to me, there's like a deep craving. I think the reason it was such a top movie was there's just such a deep yearning in humans for a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose, and like trying to tap into what is that. So anyway, much more to say on that, but I do feel like I think it's a yearning. And I think that if work can better tap into that and let AI do the things that aren't human, we should do it.
Yeah. And if I understand correctly, the work you're doing at PairUp kind of attempts to unlock that in a way or shape or form. Can you maybe explain that?
Yeah. So at PairUp, I think one of our real focus areas is letting technology to do the things that are biased or are heavy weight on humans and are things that are like, I think one of my core premises is that I think even networking and connections are incredibly biased. Like a lot of it is left, you happen to be in the room with someone who connects you, or serendipity, while I love it and leads to these beautiful fate connections of finding a mentor, or finding a teammate, or finding a friend. I think that it's a biased system. You happen to be in the room, or you happen to be sitting at the desk or the office. And so I think one of our core focus areas is how do we be better than serendipity in many ways, be better than just the chance encounters, and actually use technology to say, hey, Drew, you need to talk to these 3 people because can help you in these ways, or they're really in line with the things that you're looking for. They've done that work before and they can support you on it. So our focus area is really around helping connect the right people at the right times, and using tech to help really leverage all the knowledge we have about communities, and then let humans be human and connect together.
That's fantastic. Love that. Going down this track with AI a little bit, I saw a recent report by the World Economic Forum. They shared something like 80 million jobs will be displaced by AI. Maybe it's more. The same report showed that AI will create over 90 million. I would argue it's probably over 100 million jobs, right? It's a big platform change here for us as a society. So this could wipe out specific sectors to be replaced by a new generation of workers, or allow for massive retraining and upskilling of existing workers. How do you see this unfolding?
I think it's hard to predict the future and what exactly what things are going to look like. But I think that AI is going to be one of those things in our lifetime, in our history as a world, similar to the internet, similar to these big, rapid, it's not the disruptive innovation. It's like these truly changing the world in which we know and how things operate, which is like both exciting and terrifying. And I think it's why I think we should be doing it so thoughtfully to the extent we can, and really having all minds together at it rather than fearing it. Like, we need the educators in there. We need the social scientists in there. We need diverse perspectives and voices in there as we build it right now. I think a lot of these numbers are likely to play out. Like, I think a lot of jobs will be erased. I think a lot of jobs will be created. I think it's not necessarily going to solve all of our problems in the way that the internet didn't. I think if anything, the argument is that computers have maybe made us slower than faster on many tasks, like email and other things, but also have rapidly sped up all that we can do in powerful ways. And so I think, to me, the interesting piece is how do we build for it and pat ourselves and prepare for it and build in a way that is really thinking about all of the unintended consequences, which there will be many, to be aware of and to build with that in mind. And I think a lot of people I was listening to talk about with OpenAI last week, and I think in good ways, there are a lot of good minds building and creating this. It's going to be pretty drastic, I think, of where we're going. And I think we need the right minds in there.
Yeah. And you just mentioned like the many consequences.
Yeah.
Could you maybe extrapolate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think a lot of, even in the research that we did that I was doing in grad school, is around unintended consequences of purposive action, the things that you do and then actually create all these other kind of challenges. And I think the main comparison that I've had is even thinking about social media and youth, or these systems that are intended to be so like radically changing of the world, in which they actually like lead to all these other negative consequences. Yeah, I do think that there are going to be probably a wide array of unintended consequences of this time. And I think some of the ones that I think may be at play and that we've even been thinking about is the recommendations that AI is given. Are these the right recommendations? Should it be generating new knowledge? Should it be offering and providing suggestions around things in the right ways? And how do we actually train it to be less biased? Because we are already finding that these early systems of AI are quite biased and are also sometimes providing the wrong answers to people to do things. That's only one spectrum of AI. Obviously, there's so many ways that it's impacting our work and our world. But yeah, I think to me, the greatest risk in my mind, at least in the work realm, has been around, is it actually giving us the right answers? And I think at the large level for our society, is it going to create wars and take down systems? And I think that there are quite a few theories and worries, even, Elon Musk at the forefront of some of these figures of worry that are saying it could really take down our whole world. So I think that that's like the extreme. And I think there are also like daily ones that could affect kids and youth who are learning, and adults who are using it at work, and people who are writing essays with it, and all these things. I think that there are little and huge ones that we need to be deeply thinking about as we build.
Yeah.
That was more
no, it brings up, what are the implications for future generations? I also think it makes us, at least to the question of what kinds of skills and competencies do you think will be coveted in the future, and therefore the next generation of workers will benefit from having?
I think that one of the things that very much excites me is that it could, if we use it and we build with it in mind, for instance, I think learning has the power to be fundamentally changed. I think that a lot of our learning is very antiquated. It's regurgitation and memorization and things that we could Google for, or we could utilize ChatGPT to help us with in different ways. And then really use human creativity and thought and much more. To me, there are some abilities that's just in the learning space. Again, I think this is affecting all of our sectors in so many ways. But I think if we build with it as like a teammate, like a superpower teammate in our corner, and then think about all the ways we could kind of then affects our work or reduces our work and lets us do things that we care about, to me, that's like the beautiful possibility of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, as you were just saying, with it as a teammate, we've interviewed a few folks in robotics on this, and there's, as far as getting robots adopted into assembly lines and things, there's a psychology around like putting a hat on it, giving it a name, dressing it up, and it just triggered that.
We did that at PairUp. Our bot was initially like very cold and felt like AI. And then we named it Sam, and it's a bee now. And it's got a whole personality. And we found even customers saying, this is like this, it's my teammate. It's like actually like it's something that I can be vulnerable with and say things that I wouldn't necessarily even to real people. And that's happening with a lot of robots in different ways, even like studies around the elderly who can be more vulnerable with a robot in ways they couldn't with a human and say what they need more. And so there are some really interesting, kind of surprising, humanizing components of this that I think are fascinating.
Absolutely. So going down this talk track, how do we help people process what is performance in an organization, right? Performance measurement, I think as a whole, as a business society, it's woefully unsophisticated, especially as we go down this path of human abilities are going to be more coveted, finding those correlations to work. There's no standard out there. How do you think we should start to process this question of what does the future of performance measurement look like at work?
Putting into question how we measure productivity and how we measure kind of impact and who's being helpful at a company, who's not, and different pieces. It's been a world that I'm actually a little like wary of, or I feel that but I think it's complicated of putting in value of someone. Again, on all my sides have like my pessimist and optimist. And tend to lean towards the optimist, but it depends on my day. But I do think that there's an element where could we start to actually measure productivity? And there's a lot of these questions now. Should we even have a 9-to-5 workday? Is that when people are most productive? Could we just let people have different measurements of productivity that are more in line with them actually being impactful for the company or them adding critical thought? And it doesn't have to be in this like almost robotic 9-to-5 older kind of factory mind, which was, and even the 4-day work week versus the 5-day work week. And I think that in the optimist side, as I said, like some cool openings right now of like, how do we work? Is that actually the right way to work? Are those the metrics with which we should be just coming into a meeting every day? Is that actually productive? And could we have like different metrics for assessment on that front and rethink how the day is done? Like maybe some people work best at midnight. A lot of developers do. They're like, their favorite time is late at night to be able to code. And that's not within our work days and how things are set up. I think there's some fun questioning right now of like how performance is measured and what impact looks like. And if technology is doing some of those things that typically are like check off a box, how does that then open up? Like actually you helping a teammate was hugely helpful and more productivity than you just like getting through your emails, this kind of thing. So yeah, still part of an answer to the question, but I think there's a lot more in there. But I think that there's some fun reopenings of how those metrics are assessed, whatever. In the same.
Can you maybe talk for a little bit on the impact that having mentorship increases performance?
Yeah, there's so much fascinating research about the power of mentorship on kind of productivity and on people's willingness to stay and persist. A lot of my research was around self-efficacy and how do you help people believe in their own abilities to persist. And a lot of that, the research we found was that having role models, having mentors, having someone just in your corner and cheering you on, the role that can have in then your willingness to stay and persist and grow and move up in the organization. There's a study recently around even having one friend at work, like a best friend at work or a close friend at work led you to stay significantly longer at the organization than not feeling really closely connected to anyone. So to me, that's where, again, like that, the robot won't replace that. The AI bot won't necessarily do that. Maybe you feel comfortable talking to it and asking questions, but that really the power of people and human connection, I think there's so much evidence of how integral that is, even better than Googling something and telling you what to do, but actually having someone, even if they say the same thing as Google, telling you, supporting you, guiding you is hugely impactful.
Yeah.
In staying in and moving up.
Absolutely. So what's the business incentive to do this? Why should they care? Why should they lean into using products like PairUp or focusing on helping their employees find meaning?
I think that there's a lot of data suggesting why actually building more connected ecosystems at work, the impacts that it has on performance and output, the impacts that it has on people staying and persisting and growing and moving up in the organizations. I know for us, retention metrics are tricky. It's like a hard line of, therefore, this person stays longer. But actually, even in the daily, like the greater touch points that people are having with others in the team, how that's affecting then their speed of work and productivity, and even just like joy and passion at work. We've been able to now actually, over longitudinal studies, look at these numbers and just see the impact that having people in your corner can have and having people to turn to for help. So a lot of those are even on the like emotional, but then the output that has on the work and the productivity, and it's slightly different again, depending on the type of work in the organizations, but we've been able to really see some powerful implications of it. For me, the other metric that we're really passionate about is duplication of work across organizations, of not knowing who to turn to. There was a study that people are spending about 8 hours a week looking for answers to questions or things that they could find within talking to someone in their company. And so just if you think about that, it's like a day a week is spent like time wasted looking for answers to something, and having kind of someone to just quickly say, you should talk to this person, and getting that answered would save those 8 hours if we could do that kind of across each person. Those are some of the things that we're interested in, and just increasing touch points and the impact that can have on productivity and growth.
So ultimately, when we're talking about productivity in the business sense, the business is like productivity equals value, right? How should we process the question, what's the value of a human in the work context?
I think the value of human at work, it just depends slightly on the job, I will preface. But I think that having humans who are thinking and who are building and are using kind of their EQ as well as their kind of processing skills and critical thinking skills, like those are the pieces that I think, the relational connections, all those pieces are really, I think, what makes us uniquely human. It doesn't mean that we can't do tasks that are not using those skill sets. I think I always give this example, like within our work, that certainly it's hard for someone to know who they should talk to and kind of network and find the right people, especially it's affected if you're introverted or extroverted, or if you feel comfortable asking for help, or there are all these things that I think actually are biased and unfair in how human connection works. But nothing will obviously ever replace just getting to talk to someone and be next to someone and feel their energy and think with them. And to me, there are these interesting lines within all that we build in AI, like in every company, of where are these pieces that should never be taken away and can never replace the power of a human relationship, or the power of human critical thought or reasoning or rational thinking or diverse perspectives coming together. And like some of these pieces that I think AI can help us with, but then we need to take the next step of what does that mean? Is that the right recommendation? Is this accounting for different perspectives that should be in the table and should be thinking about this and connecting with? Yeah, I think those are some of the lines in my mind.
Are there specific areas or conversion points, as you were just saying, that maybe you could provide a little more context? Are there specific areas in business where you think that maybe technology should play more of a role and then less of a role?
I think that technology should play a role whenever there's tasks that are like extremely duplicative, that are pulling, at least this is broad strokes, so I think this is part of it, but pulling from large data sets. To me, for instance, that initially our storyline was like a team of 20 people, they're talking enough, they're working it. The minute you get past, some people say group size of 8, but in my mind, over 100, you're like the human complexity of being able to know with all these data sets what's happening gets increasingly time intensive as well as complex and biased. And so to me, it's like, where do these tasks can actually be better done through a machine that's like processing large amounts of data, that's making sense of data, that's providing recommendations, or that is doing these duplicative processes that it doesn't make sense for someone to manually do.
Yeah.
That's one of my lines. I think it, again, depends on greatly the type of work and what's happening. And then I think there are lines, again, of maybe a machine could do that, but actually a human could make sense of it and think through it in more impactful ways, but also in ways that potentially could be less biased than the way that the system is working. But we're biased as people too, unfortunately.
Also, one of the trends that we've seen over the past few years, and I think the pandemic totally accelerated this, is the popularity of freelance and fractional work. Do you think it's possible to build a company 100% of freelance or fractional workers?
A lot of startups are testing freelance fractional work. I would say that a lot of seeing more and more colleagues who are like not colleagues, but friends who are building companies that are, for the most part, all fractional workers, except them. Personally, I think that there's like these team, having really people who are in the weeds and then going gets tough and like deeply, certainly freelancers can be that way deeply, but I think having really that team cohesion and like in the work daily, especially when you're building companies, can have huge impact. But I do think we're going to see the trend of more fractional work. And I think it's just the reality. I don't know if people have to only do one job. There's actually benefits, I think, for a lot of people of having multiple things they're working on and multiple kinds of teams, and the balancing that can have and the opening that can have for a lot of different kinds of minds and types of roles, et cetera. Yeah, I think we're going to see increasingly fractional work. I think even hybrid work, because people now are wanting to be able to be more flexible in when they work and where they work from. And yeah, I think we're going to continue to see this trend continue, especially as AI comes in and does certain jobs, and then it requires different types of minds for the tasks that it cannot do.
Yeah, absolutely. What I get excited about is just the move, even if it's like the pendulum swinging a little too far and that'll come back. It's opened our eyes or reopened our eyes to what can come out of having a contract. And I think Europe in a lot of ways is way more sophisticated and advanced than we are here in the US. You know, it gave me actually excitement to hear that Upwork earlier this year announced, right, that they're going to allow for full-time contract on their platform. In that same vein, we're seeing a lot of union activity and chatter lately. What do you think this all says about like at-will employment, especially here in the US?
Yeah, and I actually didn't see that Upwork statement, that announcement, but that's fascinating. And yeah, I think new lines are being drawn, to your point. We're creating these kind of new bounds of how work should be done, where it should be done. And I agree. I think Europe is really setting some interesting new trends around how my brother actually just moved to Spain with his family, and they're working from there and building businesses and have really adopted to this kind of a different way of living and pace, et cetera. Yeah, I mean, I do see that it's going to open up where you can get work from, where you can hire or be able to hire from, and also the types of amazing minds that you can tap into by being able to open who's on a team and who doesn't have to just be obviously limited to your state or where you are, or someone who can jump in full time every moment. But I think there's some exciting openings that are happening, and also have dangerous implications. We're then missing some of the human connection pieces, and we're missing some of the changes of going into the office and working from home and being in a bedroom all day. There's some things that are obviously going to need to be thought through as we continue to evolve where and how work is done and where we're pulling from and what time zones people are working in and everything. I was talking to a friend the other day who works all night. She's now works all through the night so that she can do fractional work in different areas. And that's awesome. And also potentially not great for her social emotional well-being. Yeah, I think there's some questions that come in this kind of opening, which are exciting and important. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Curious to hear your thoughts, shifting gears a little bit, but around the conversation around career development.
Yeah.
I think historically we look to our businesses that we work for, our employers, to give us that as a perk.
Yes.
Right? At the same time, because we rely on that, we're not the primary beneficiary, the business is.
Yes.
And I think that's probably led to a lot of unmeasured or unaccounted for pigeonholing, people not actually being able to even achieve their potential in their whole career. If we even look at like the talent agency space, it's today in business, I put air quotes up because these are business agencies, not talent agencies at all. They represent the business. Again, the money comes from the business. Therefore, the candidate is the product, right? The freelance and fractional movement in a lot of ways, because people are taking their career into their own hands, their own career development in their own hands, is accelerating this. Do you think that we'll start to see a world where more people will be taking career development into their own hands and not being beholden to business to do that? Or is that far-fetched?
I definitely think that career development is drastically changing right now. And also what I think that the early days of kind of master class and starting to be able to learn online, all these different skill sets, and people right now, even I think COVID shifted a lot of people's career trajectories of them questioning, is this even the job that I want to do? Maybe I can learn how to code, or I can learn how to also be a designer and do that on the side and tap into my creative side or make music. Or I think the internet, if anything, I think has started to open people up to all the possibilities for work and the kinds of learnings that they can have. And it's less of just learning in school, what you learn in school, and that's your career. But I think that there's openings right now happening in, I'm going to learn and do different types of jobs. I was talking to actually a woman who was like 25 and is already, she's doing like 3 career paths basically at this age, which is just, I think 10 years ago wasn't really even the norm. It was like, you're going to do one thing and what are you going to be when you get older? And that I think is being turned upside down a little bit. So yeah, I do think that there's some really amazing openings that are happening. I think it's also scaring companies who are like, am I hiring someone and half the time they're going to be on? And what that has, I think I know a lot of startups are wrestling with this. Is the person even working on, are they working on 3 other things while they're working on the company? It's been a common concern in startups hiring, but I know also big companies is the quiet quitting or working on the side on multiple things. So I think that there's some of that. And I guess the last other thing I'll just reflect on was I remember when I was working at Facebook, now Meta, I remember it was one of those jobs where I would go in and it was like pretty much spent my whole day there. It was like I'd bike there using the company bike. They'd help me they do my laundry. They fed me breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I would often go in on weekends and meet friends there, and we'd rock climb there, and we would work on our projects that weekend. And it was like, in some ways, my work and worlds really started to be in this one space, and they got like my full self, which was both amazing because then I was like very in it and I led my team and there were like such beauty in that. And I remember also there were elements where it was like, it's hard to actually be even separate from work. Your full self is there. And so I think that there's, some interesting now, like especially in the challenge of getting people to come into the office and feel as connected to their company and feel like really entwined. I think that there's also some elements that we're now having to rethink of how do you really get the full self of someone at work and really be totally invested in it, which is interesting. Yeah.
Awesome. Emily, I've definitely appreciated our time today. This has been great. Before we wrap, is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't touched on yet?
I think you nailed it. I think we went through the main themes. Is there anything you felt we didn't touch on?
No.
I'll just close with it. To me, we really need diverse minds in this space building right now. I think that there is, it's like one of my biggest goals, and it was why I used to run a nonprofit to help more women and get into building technologies. We really need psychologists, anthropologists, social scientists, artists, like all these people in the generative AI building space, like in building tech right now. I think that where we've fallen victim in the past, we're not always necessarily thinking with like kind of the full picture and spectrum of teams building these systems. And I think that's where sometimes they can go because we're not all thinking about how that affects each of us. So to me, my big plug is like, how do we really build teams with diverse perspectives, really taking into account what the complexities of building these systems are going to be. And I think there's huge potential for them. So I also feel like we shouldn't just shy away and be afraid of them, which can also be the response. But actually, we need to be like at the table building it together and even collaboratively across companies building it together. So that's my big plug is we just need different voices all in there together and not shying away from it and being afraid of it.
Awesome. Very well said. Emily, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. So nice to chat. Thanks so much for having me.